Hello, welcome to the CTCL Virtual Days College Fair. Thank you for joining us. Have a few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen. Type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening. Be sure to sign up for additional ones where you signed up for this session. And this presentation is being recorded. It'll be available within about a week, again, at the same website where you registered for this session. It's all the housekeeping stuff I have, so I will get out of the way, and I'll turn it over to our presenters. Again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Russ. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with our presentation. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon to learn a little bit more about the Colleges That Change Lives organization and about the liberal arts in general. I hope that you have already been joining our schools for some of the information sessions and other presentations that are happening throughout this weekend, or that you have several more coming up tonight and tomorrow. We thank you for joining us. We know that a lot of times there's Zoom fatigue and things like that happening right now, but we're very glad that you chose to come and learn about the Colleges That Change Lives and the ways in which we can help you with your college search process. So during this particular session, we're going to focus sort of threefold. We're going to talk about how to take some of the stress out of your college search process, why the liberal arts in general continue to be relevant and important, and why a Colleges That Change Lives school might be a good fit for you. Throughout this presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. My colleague Chris, who is a member of the board of directors, is monitoring that box and will answer them either throughout the presentation or at the end when we have a little bit of time for questions. So feel free to drop them in the box if you do have questions. So just a little bit about me, the little person that you can see in the corner of your screen. My name is Rachel West. I am a member of the board of directors of the Colleges That Change Lives organization. I'm also an associate director of admission at Agnes Scott College in Atlanta, one of the CTCL member institutions. I think before I talk and tell you things to know about your college search process, I think it's only fair that I tell you a little bit about my own college search process, in which I can tell you I did pretty much everything wrong. So I went to a lower income rural high school. I grew up in a town that had less than 3,500 people in it. At my high school at the time, 4-year college going rates were about 50-50 in terms of whether students chose to do it. And nearly all of the students that at my high school would go to the large university ofs in our state. That is not the experience that I personally wanted. I knew for sure that I succeeded in smaller classes when I had 20 people in my high school classes as opposed to my largest classes, which had 38 or 40. So I knew that I wanted a small school, and with that, in general, sort of focused on liberal arts. However, the one thing that I did very wrong was because that didn't limit the list down enough. My parents asked me to sort of think about the academic interests that I had, so I could make sure that any schools that I was interested in had those interests. Like many high school seniors, I had no idea what I wanted to major in or what career I wanted to go into. So I was pretty good at science and math. I had heard that engineering was a safe degree, so I decided, yep, that's it. I'm going to be an engineer, and I only looked at schools with physics and engineering programs. As you can probably guess, I did not end up going into engineering. It turns out I like math until directions get involved, which is very important to physics and engineering. So the good news for me was that I did end up at a liberal arts college and a Colleges That Change Lives school in Center College in Danville, Kentucky, which allowed the change to what I actually did want to do to be a much easier process than it could have been. So I think everyone's college search process is a little bit of a roller coaster. There are going to be some ups and downs. You're going to change direction a couple of times, maybe in ways that you didn't expect to. There's not really a magic wand that can make the process easier, unfortunately. However, in this session, what I really want to focus on are some ways to sort of guide your college search process while also talking about why a liberal arts college or university may be a direction that will be helpful for you. But before we even get to any of that, I want to address sort of the elephant in the room. And that is, of course, how is COVID-19 going to change your college search? It already is in the fact that you are doing this as a virtual event instead of an in-person college fair, which is what we generally have done for the past several years. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you might be worried about, anxious about in terms of COVID-19 and your college search. So your transcript might look different than what it would have in the past. Specifically for last year in March, when most of the schools in the country went to virtual learning, every school did something different. Some schools went to pass-fail grades for that semester. Some schools went with the exact same. You did virtual learning and grades were the same. Some schools stopped grades in March. So there were a lot of different methods for schools in what they chose to do in the spring semester of last year. What I want you to know is that is okay. Colleges know that there were lots of different things that happened. Just know how your school addressed grades last year. That's all that we ask, so that when we can't figure it out, we can ask you and you can explain it to us. I think the other big one is about testing. It is very hard right now for you to take or retake the standardized tests, the SAT or the ACT. Testing centers are being closed all of the times for health reasons. They're very limited. Maybe you have to go a very long way away to get to a testing center. And maybe you personally don't feel safe going to a testing center for health reasons. That is totally okay. What I want you to know is that 43, nearly all of the CTCL member institutions that are here in this event are test optional. 2 are test blind, which means if you don't send them, we're not going to look at them. And in the United States, over 2/3 of the colleges and universities have gone test optional, either fully or temporarily. And we will likely see more do that because it's only getting harder for students to take those standardized tests. So what I want you to know is that standardized testing is not the end all be all to you getting into college, getting scholarships to whatever your next step will be. So that's an important thing to know. I think one of the few positive things that have come out of COVID-19, and it seems weird to say that anything is positive, but something that I do think is a little bit positive is that many schools have really enhanced their online offerings. So this particular event, virtual tours, interviews, virtual campus visits, meetings with students and faculty, these are things that were not available online prior to this year generally. So now you can learn more about the schools you're interested in than ever before without having to pay to go on a visit to that school, to do all of the traveling, to figure out a time to miss school, all of those sorts of things. You're able to sit on your couch and go on a virtual visit to pretty much every school in the country right now, which is a fantastic experience in order to learn more about schools. The one thing is you do have to seek out those experiences. As I said at the top, I know that a lot of us are really tired of being on virtual visits, particularly if your high school is virtual this semester. You may be really, really tired of staring at a screen at the end of the day. However, I think this is one really great opportunity in terms of getting to know a school and also getting to talk one-on-one with members of that school's community. So do keep those opportunities in mind. I also think a lot of people get really nervous because your junior, senior, whatever it is year looks different than you might have expected it to look when you're filling out your applications. Maybe competitions or athletics or extracurriculars that you thought you were going to be able to do didn't happen because of COVID-19. I want you to know that that is okay. There's a reason why one of the most common essay questions on applications and scholarships is about overcoming challenges. It's one of the things that colleges are really interested in knowing how you deal with. And this is a really big challenge. So what we want to know is how you have responded to COVID-19 and to the challenges associated with it. Now I say that, but I also want to say that we do not expect that you have done something amazing in this time period. I don't expect that every single student did something like run an independent research project out of their kitchen that is now being published, all of those sorts of things. Remember that we are also going through the COVID-19 pandemic. I have been working from home since March. I haven't been back on campus since then. And I did not run a fascinating research experiment from my kitchen, so I can't expect you have to either. So what I expect is just that you have continued to do your classes, those sorts of things. College and admissions rep really understand how your high school experience has been disrupted, and we're going to be looking for that context when we're in the application. So I hope that that de-stresses you a little bit when you're thinking about your college search process this year, next year, whatever it might be. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's kind of shake that off and go back to the beginning. And let's talk a little bit more generally about starting your college search process. So how do you start your college search process? Maybe you're at the very beginning right now. Maybe you're sort of in the middle. You're trying to figure out exactly which schools you want to apply to. Either way, it's a big question, and it's one that stresses out a lot of people. There are a lot of schools in the United States, over 5,300 to choose from. And you have to limit that down to, the schools that are good fits for you and that you can apply for. So we're going to talk a little bit about the college search process. And I think one way to start is by talking about maybe some preconceived notions, some things that you might be thinking about the college search process, and by unpacking those a little bit. So let's start with maybe some of the things that you're thinking. So maybe that when you think about your college search, you think there are schools that you should be looking at or things that you should be looking at. So maybe that's the US News and World Report rankings, which are the most well-known ranking system for colleges and universities. Maybe you think you should be looking specifically at those rankings. Maybe you think you should be looking at a specific group of schools, whether that's Ivy League or maybe schools that are in the SEC or Pac-10 or the University of California system. Or maybe you think you should be looking specifically at land-grant publics, your local university of. Maybe you are just thinking about the schools that everyone in your high school tends to apply to, the ones you're most familiar with. So you have all of those ideas in your heads about the schools that you should be looking at, right? Maybe you're also thinking about return on investment. College is an expensive proposition. Generally, you have to pay some money to attend college. You want to know that it's going to be worth it. What happens after I graduate college? Will I be successful? How do I figure that out when I'm looking at a school? Maybe that's one of your questions. And maybe you're looking at the list of colleges that change lives, schools that are at this presentation today, and you're having a couple of thoughts. Maybe you're thinking, these schools are too small. I really want the kind of experience I see on TV where people are in a lecture theater. Maybe you're a STEM major and you're thinking, how can I do science at a liberal arts school? Is that really an option? Maybe you're thinking, my personal favorite, these schools are only for liberals. And maybe you're looking at it and you haven't really heard of many of the CTCL schools and you're thinking no one has heard of these schools, anyone. That is certainly how I felt when I was looking at CTCL schools as a high school student. I once had a friend ask me what colleges I was applying to, and when I mentioned Center College, my alma mater, she said, that is a direction, not a college. So obviously that is incorrect, and I take great offense to that. But I think it is definitely a valid thought if you haven't heard of any of the CTCL schools. But what I want to do is challenge some of these ideas and talk about the things that might really be helpful when you are looking at your college search. And I want to start specifically by looking at those US News and World Report rankings that I mentioned earlier. So if you aren't familiar, the US News and World Report rankings are really the big ranking system that most people know about. If you search best colleges on Google, it's one of the first things that's going to pop up. And I want you to know that it's totally natural to want to look at these ranking systems. Especially here in the United States, we love to rank things. We give stars to things on Amazon and on Rotten Tomatoes, and to our Lyft driver, we rank everything, right? But what I think is important to know when you look at the rankings, if you're looking at a school and what its ranking is on the US News and World Report list, is how did that ranking come to be? What is behind the ranking? How is it made? So we actually you can dig in and see how schools get their rankings. And so when you're looking at US News Report, those rankings are actually made up of peer assessment, faculty resources, student excellence, financial resources, graduation rate, alumni giving, retention rate, and social mobility. Those are the things that specifically are a part of the ranking. And you can also see up on the screen sort of the weights that are given to each of those. So if you're considering using these rankings as a way to limit down your college search, I think it's important to look at this list and ask, are these the important values for you and your family? And the appropriate weights. So for example, for me personally, the one that always confuses me is that a full fifth of the ranking is made up of peer assessment, which essentially means what other colleges think about that college. That's not a particularly highly important value to me, but maybe it is to you, and that's okay. And there may be factors that aren't on this. Maybe you value the athletic program. Maybe you personally value racial and ethnic diversity. There might be values that you would consider in a ranking system that are not on this list. So I think that is something important to consider when you're looking at rankings. So I actually want to show you another tool that I think can help illustrate the things that you might want to look for in your college search a little bit better. So that is called the Gallup-Purdue Index, or the GPI. So this is a report from 2015, which did a survey of over 30,000 college graduates from across the United States. And this survey really was trying to figure out what students or what graduates thought about their undergraduate experience, the college where they went, the kinds of things that they did in college, and how those experiences relate to their current well-being and job quality. So essentially, they're trying to answer the question, is college worth it? Which is an extremely broad question, as I'm sure you can think of. So here's how they really define that question. They asked all of these graduates, what were the things that you did at your undergraduate institution, and how did they affect your current areas of well-being? And they had 5 different areas. So there was purpose well-being, which is, do you like what you do, and are you motivated to achieve your goals? There was social well-being, which is, do you have strong and supportive relationships in your life? Financial well-being, which is, are you able to effectively manage your economic life? Do you have less stress around finances, increased security? Community well-being, which is, do you have a sense of engagement with where you live? Do you like where you live? Do you feel safe, and do you have pride in your community? And then physical well-being. Do you have good health and energy to get things done on a daily basis? So I think you can agree that's a pretty well-rounded way to look at well-being. So they asked all of these graduates to rank how their experiences in college led to their current well-being. So here's what they found. And I think this is a really important quote. So the type of school alumni went to, whether it's public or private, small or large, very selective or less selective, was far less likely to be related to the quality of alumni's lives after they graduated than specific experiences that they had in college. So in other words, it doesn't matter what school or type of school a student went to. What mattered is what they did while they were there. So specifically, what did those graduates do that they said were incredibly important to them? So the odds of the graduates agreeing that their education was worth the cost and that led to their current well-being were 1.9 times higher if they said that a professor cared about them as a person, or if they had a mentor who encouraged them to pursue their goals and dreams. 1.8 times higher if they had a professor who made them excited about learning. 1.6 times higher if they worked on a project that took a semester or more to complete. 1.6 times higher if they were extremely active in extracurricular activities and organizations in the community. 1.5 times higher if they had an internship or job that let them apply what they were learning in the classroom. 1.4 times higher if they had a leadership position in a club or organization, and 1.2 times higher if they had a paid job or internship. So these are the things that these graduates did in college that led to them having higher levels of success and well-being later in life. So I think when you're thinking about these, one of the things that you can kind of keep in mind is that when you're looking at colleges and trying to figure out whether a college is a good fit for you, you might want to keep these in mind as questions to ask. So this might be maybe a slide you take a picture of, something like that, so that when you are looking at schools, you can ask these questions, try to figure out the answers to see if you are going to have a great experience at that institution. So questions like, do professors care about individual students? Is mentoring valued? How does the school talk about mentoring? And that may be a question that you can find online, but I also really encourage you, that seems like a great kind of question to ask a student at an institution, because they're the ones that really know whether they feel like professors care about them, right? Are the faculty excited about teaching? Are they teaching undergrads? So at some institutions, as an undergraduate student, you may be taught primarily by graduate assistants, and professors really only teach, graduate students. At CTCL schools, that rarely happens. Most of our students are taught by full professors. What are the kinds of long-term collaborative work available? So are there research opportunities with professors? Is it available to a lot of people, or is it really competitive? Only a few people get to do it. And when do they get to do it? Is it something that can start as early as your first year in college, or is it really reserved for senior students? So how do students get involved on campus and in the community? How does the school support internships? Are there opportunities for leadership? And not just for the stellar students. So everybody knows that kid in their high school who is the president of 30 clubs and organizations. If you can't think of that kid, congratulations, it's probably you. But it's important to keep in mind, does everyone have the opportunity to be a leader on campus? Do they have Greek life? How do those factor into campus life? Are you personally interested in Greek life? How many students do a paid internship or have a job? Is it something that they want to do, or is it something that they have to do? Those are important things to keep in mind. And you may have additional questions to add to this, right? You may have questions to add in terms of specific things that you're interested in academically, extracurricularly, that sort of thing. But this is a good place to start in starting to get at what an institution offers and what they care about. So I want to switch gears a little bit now that we've learned what the important things are, according to the Gallup-Purdue Index, that increase student success if they do them in their undergraduate experience. I want to skip to talking a little bit more about liberal arts education specifically. So one of the great things that I think about liberal arts degrees is that in general, liberal arts education is known for those engagement experiences that students have while they are on campus. And one of the other great things about liberal arts is that it's really education for a lifetime. So the focus in liberal arts is on no matter what academic interest you're in, whether you're a music major or a chemistry major, in a liberal arts college, you're going to learn certain skills that will prepare you for the jobs of the future, including those that don't exist yet. If there are any parents on this call, you can probably all remember jobs that exist now that you had never even thought about existing when you were in high school. And so it's really important that you learn the skills to succeed in those kinds of jobs rather than specifically be prepared for one job. So those skills that are valued by liberal arts colleges include creative thinking, collaborative work, interdisciplinary thinking, leadership and the ability to follow, communication skills across the board, in person, in writing, presentations, small groups, large groups, like I said, across the board, data analysis, and complex problem solving. So I want you to do is keep those skills in mind. These are the skills that liberal arts colleges teach every student. And they're not only important skills just for you to learn, but they're also the skills that employers endorse. So the Association of American Colleges and Universities asked employers what things they thought colleges should place more emphasis on when teaching undergraduate students. What are the things that they think students should be learning before they come and work at their company? And the areas of emphasis that they ranked the highest were critical thinking and analytical reasoning, complex problem solving, written and oral communication, application of knowledge and skills in real-world settings, location, organization, and evaluation of information, and innovation and creativity. So as you can see, a lot of overlap between this list and the list of what liberal arts colleges prepare students for. And not only do employers sort of endorse these skills, but they also tell us that they look for them when they're hiring. So the Committee for Economic Development, excuse me, asked employers what skills they thought were the most important to them when hiring someone. And the top 5 essential competencies that they came up with were teamwork and collaboration, problem solving, the ability to work with others of diverse backgrounds, critical thinking, and oral communication. All things that were on the list of what liberal arts college students are prepared for. And it's not really just in that first job, right? These are getting hired in sort of your first job, but it's also long term. So the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce just recently released this incredible long range survey where they looked at different college graduates, and they looked at what is essentially the return on investment. What are the earnings for graduates 40 years out even, and from different kinds of institutions. And so what they found was that the median ROI of liberal arts college students is nearly $200,000 higher than the median for all colleges. So this is, long-term, the kind of financial success that student or graduates have throughout their lives. And the 40-year median ROI of liberal arts institutions is slightly higher than those of 4-year engineering and technology related schools and 4-year business and management schools. So what that shows us is that liberal arts colleges and universities are really based on making sure that you are successful for a lifetime throughout your work. So that is really why we think liberal arts colleges are so important. And it's one of the reasons why CTCL continues to talk about liberal arts and break down why we think our liberal arts colleges bring value to the college landscape. So what is the Colleges That Change Lives organization in general, and why should you be looking at these schools? So you're here, so you already are interested in some way, but I want to give you a little bit of background on CTCL. So Colleges That Change Lives Incorporated is a nonprofit organization. And our mission is that we are dedicated to the advancement and support of the student-centered college admission process. We support the goal of each student finding a college that develops a lifelong love of learning and provides the foundation for a successful and fulfilling life beyond college. So that is our mission. We were sort of come out of this book, and maybe you've heard of this book, maybe you haven't. But in 1996, Lauren Pope, who was the longtime education editor for the New York Times, saw a very disturbing trend among the colleges that people were looking and talking about. And it's a trend that's only gotten worse since 1996, which is students only looking at schools you've heard a lot about, schools that are highly selective, and other schools that have really strong outcomes being left out. So he went on sort of a huge tour looking at schools across the country, focusing on schools that had student-centered experiences and strong outcomes that you may not have heard of. And so what that turned into was this book, Colleges That Change Lives, the 40 Schools That Will Change the Way You Think About Colleges. In 2006, those 40 schools got together and formed the nonprofit CTCL with the 40 founding colleges. There have actually been 4 revisions of the book, with the most recent one published in 2012, which is why we're now at 44 schools in the CTCL organization. So the most recent book was written by Hilary Mantel Oswald. Lauren Pope unfortunately passed away, so we don't know if there's going to be another book, but we continue on with the mission of changing the way that people think about colleges. And how we do that is through a few different things. We want to push back on the media frenzy about college admission. So if you're anything like me, it seems the only time that you read about college admissions in the news is either when there's some kind of scandal, or when you're talking about the kid who applied to 100 schools and didn't get into any, or how hard it is to get into some schools. Our hope is that we can de-stress the college admissions process in general for students and families. We want to help people see beyond the rankings, see what rankings are, how they can be useful, and how they cannot be useful. We want to speak to the quality and benefits of a liberal arts education through very much what we've been doing today. And we want to support the recruitment of our member colleges. So let's talk about those member colleges for just a moment. So we are made up of 44 colleges and universities across 25 states. You can see we're sort of all across the United States. The schools are 42 private schools, 2 public, and all fairly small. The average enrollment is at just over 1,500 students among our colleges. So here you can see the full list, and I would really encourage you to think about these schools. We have a great search engine tool up on our CTCL website where you can sort of sort through the schools, see which ones have specific academic programs, those sorts of things. We really think that every single school on this list provides unique offerings and is a great value to students. So we really think that that is an option and opportunity for you. I can unfortunately not talk about every school on this list in 45 minutes. We just don't have time. So I hope you will join us for those info sessions that are happening throughout the weekend. But just to give you a little taste of some of the unique opportunities available at these schools, we have schools like Hampshire College and Evergreen College, where there aren't set majors, but you are able to mold your education by creating your own major. Schools like Cornell College, where you take one class at a time, which is actually a strategy that has been adopted by other colleges as a response to COVID-19. You have schools like Goucher College, which requires all students to study abroad. There's one women's college on the list, Agnes Scott College, which I work for, and one men's college, Wabash College. There's only 3 men's colleges in the United States. We have one NCAA Division I school on the list, our St. Mary's College of California, and 2 Division II, Hillsdale College in Michigan and Eckerd College in Florida. So you can kind of see there's a lot of opportunities presented here at these institutions. And I really hope that you will be able to look through some of them, because I'm 100% sure that there is a school on this list that is a good fit for you. Okay, so that sounds great. Why should you look at one of these schools specifically? So I want you to think back to earlier when we talked about those student engagement questions about what makes a successful college experience, the things that college graduates said they did in college that made them successful later in life. These are the things that colleges that change life schools are known for. It's known for small class sizes where you really get to know professors and you have strong mentorship opportunities. We're known for the strong opportunities on campus in terms of internships, study abroad, athletics, co-ops, majors, minors, activities. We're known for student support services, so making sure that you have accessible education options, mental and physical health options, career advising, those sorts of things. I mentioned earlier already, a lot of our schools, nearly all of our schools, are test optional or test blind, which means that you aren't required to take one of those tests to be given admission. And in general, as I mentioned earlier, 42 of the schools are private schools, which may have a larger sticker price, but often have larger scholarship and financial aid ability, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in just a moment. And CTCL schools have strong outcomes. So one way to look at the outcomes, other than the kinds of things we've already looked at, are these sort of premier scholarships and fellowships that are really well known in the country and that are ways to show that there's really successful students on a campus. So the Fulbright Scholars, which is a scholarship that offers research, study, and teaching to recent graduates. There were 42 Fulbright Scholars at CTCL organizations in 2019, and 26 of the member institutions were cited as top producers. The Watson Fellowship, which is a 1-year grant for independent exploration. 6 were at CTCL schools in 2018. The Gilman Scholars Program, which is a grant program for students who are high achieving but maybe have limited financial means to study or intern abroad. 32 at CTCL schools in the 2018-2019 year. And 3 of our member schools were named top producers of Peace Corps volunteers. So these are all indicators of high levels of competitiveness among the students that go to CTCL schools. But why does all this matter? Why does this matter to you and your family? So I think one of the things that's very important to know, as I mentioned earlier, that one of the things that we often hear about are the institutions that reject the majority of students who apply. It was big news recently that there was an institution who got below a 1% acceptance rate. Those are the schools that we hear about. Those are the reasons why we stress out about getting into colleges. Here's the truth. The average admission rate at CTCL colleges and universities is about 65%. And this is also the national average for four-year colleges and universities. So realistically, the reality is you are going to get into a college as long as you're not just applying to the schools that have the admission rate of less than 5%. You're going to get into a college. So it's not so much, will I get in? It's where will I go? What is a good fit for me? How do I find that out? It's about what happens while you're on campus, as we've said multiple times. One of the other things that I want to bring up as why this matters is I think that a lot of times something that gets a little bit left behind when we're talking about college admissions is the various identities that people bring into the college search process. And so I also think it's important to keep in mind that you can bring your identities into the college search process and use them to sort of figure out places for yourself. So if you're a first generation college student, one of the first people in your family to go to school or to go to college, look for schools that have strong support groups on campus. If you're a student who identifies as BIPOC, you have to make the choice about what kind of college experience you want to have. And this is true for everyone. You can have a college experience where everyone on campus looks like you. You can have a college experience where you're one of the few people on your campus that looks like you. Or you can have a college experience where there's a wide mix of students on campus. You have to make that decision about what makes the most sense for you. Same for low-income students, really looking into the financial aid and scholarship policies at schools, and same for our undocumented and DACA students. So I do want to talk a little bit about financial aid, because one of the common misconceptions about liberal arts institutions is that they're too expensive. So what I want to say is do not get stuck on the sticker price of an institution. As I mentioned earlier, frequently CTCL schools and other liberal arts institutions, other private institutions, are able to really offer good merit and financial aid that make them really affordable options for students. So a few things to keep in mind with financial aid. There are several different ways that you might be applying for financial aid, lots of different forms. One of the most common ones is the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA through the federal government. There's also the CSS profile, which is a little bit more in depth than some institutions ask for. Some institutions have specific financial aid that's just a form for their college. And if you're an international student, sometimes there are special financial aid applications specifically for you. Outside of regular sort of federal financial aid, there are also other aid opportunities in terms of state financial aid. If you are applying to schools in the state in which you have residency, there may be merit-based or need-based aid available based on that. There also is institutional financial aid. So a college in general may be able to offer you financial help, both merit-based and need-based. And then there are outside scholarships, which we also really encourage students to look at. There are many, many different aggregate sites. FastWeb is one. I will say there are, different outside scholarships for pretty much every kind of thing that you're into. If you're into Model UN, if you're into, robotics, there are scholarships for those. We have a scholarship, the Colleges That Change Lives Scholarship, if you're going to attend a CTCL school. So start looking at those that might fit you. There are two different types of financial aid. There's gift aid and there's self-help aid. Gift aid is those scholarships and grants that you don't have to pay back. Self-help aid are things like work study where you earn money and loans. So the thing to keep in mind is that for all the CTCL schools and also every college and university in the United States has different policies for admission and for scholarships. So if you're the kind of person who does spreadsheets, if you're the kind of person who does Post-it notes, whatever it is, find a way to keep those organized for schools that you're interested in. And here's just a thing to keep in mind. There are less than 100 schools in the country that meet full need. I think a lot of times people come into the conversation about college thinking I should get a full ride. There are realistically very few of those in the United States. And things are going to be different this year. Your financial aid might be affected by COVID-19. So the most recent, if you're applying this year, the financial aid process is using the most recent taxes that you filed, which is 2019. 2019 was not a year affected by COVID-19. So things may be very different now than what your paperwork says. So if that is the case for you, make sure you are in touch with the admission counselor and the financial aid department at the schools you're applying to. There may be options that they have that you can work with to make your financial aid more feasible. And I want to just briefly go through a few pieces of advice and next steps, things you can be doing after you go to this presentation. So I already mentioned our website and the search tool where you can look through the different CTCL schools and the rest of the information sessions going on this weekend. Have conversations as a family, as a group, about the college search process. I think it's good to schedule times to talk about it. Maybe you always talk about it on Tuesdays, or maybe you have a time to talk about it on Thursday. But I also think it's equally important to schedule times not to talk about the college search process. Maybe dinner is a college off limits time, whatever works best for you. Reach out to admission counselors at schools. We love to talk to you, especially now when a lot of us are working from home. The only thing we want is for you to talk to us and ask us questions. Keep track of deadlines and checklists, as I mentioned before. Talk to your support system, talk to high school counselors, family, friends about scholarships and things that you might want to check in on. And look at the resources that are available virtually, both visits and other resources. I know that there are several CTCL schools who are offering workshops on applications, essays, and more. And then when you're ready, it's time to apply. So that is the end for me. I have all of the information up on screen, both my contact information and Chris, who's been monitoring the Q&A's contact information, as well as CTCL's information. If you have questions that we didn't answer, if you want to ask more in-depth questions about CTCL as an organization or schools, please, please, please reach out to us. We want to know those questions, and we're happy to help no matter what. So now that we've made it to the end, we have about 3-ish minutes to get to a couple of questions. So Chris, have any questions come through that I need to answer?
Unfortunately, no. There are no questions. There
Okay.
was a question about whether or not this presentation was available for to be given at a specific high school, and I directed everyone to the Speakers Bureau.
Excellent. Yeah, we're always happy to give the presentation again to talk about CTCL. I know I speak for both Chris and myself. We've both done it for our schools very recently. So if there's any way that we can help, either if you're a high school counselor who's watching this, or if you're a parent who's watching this, if there are questions that you have, you can always reach out to us and we're happy to help with those. So since we do have a few more minutes, if there are questions just as we're ending, please drop those in. I don't want to leave any questions unanswered. One thing that I will just say in general, I mentioned earlier about the virtual opportunities that are available at schools. And I think those are especially good opportunities when I know that many high schools are on virtual and hybrid plans right now, and maybe you aren't able to have as close of a relationship with your high school and college counselors. I know, for example, the institution I work at has an essay workshop up online. I know that there are others that host application workshops to help you walk through the application or the FAFSA or things like that. So I would really encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities as ways to help you along in your process. You don't have to do everything on your own. And I think that that's important to keep in mind, especially right now. Let's de-stress things as much as humanly possible. And then just checking the Q&A box. Okay, so one last question. I think probably maybe the only question we have time for, but if you have another one, go ahead and slip those in. This one specifically is about the slide I asked earlier about first-generation college students, and it asked about the support groups that I mentioned. So I think that I want to say at the beginning that if you're a first-generation college student, you can be successful anywhere. But one of the great things about the CTCL schools in general is that we are smaller colleges with smaller admissions offices. So we are able to work more closely with our students to help make sure that you are successful through the admissions and financial aid process. So I think if you aren't super familiar with college admissions in general, if you have a lot of questions, if you just are not sure where to go next, I think it's great to reach out to us, even if it's just a general question about next steps. Admissions counselors at CTCL schools are always happy to answer those kinds of questions. So thank you for asking that. So I think that we have approached our time. I want to thank you again for joining us this evening. This recording will be up if you need, and also please feel free to reach out to us if you need anything at all.
Thank you very much, Rachel and Chris, for the great information there. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for this session. When you close this window, there'll be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. This is just one of many sessions being hosted. Be sure to sign up for additional ones where you signed up for this one. And in about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all of the other session recordings, again, at the same place you signed up for this session. Once again, thank you to our presenters today for sharing all that great information, and thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.